नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने
What's going on here? There is number has come down. All the MS students are here. Okay. How many are PhD students? 2, 3. MPhil? Huh? He is also an MPhil student only? Oh, okay. Okay. MA? Oh, this means in the integrated part you are in the 4th and 5th year. Okay. So this is not meant for BA students. Okay. Okay. So you are looking at the words orality, literacy, text, context and textualism, there are etc. There are many words like that. You know the word oral, right? You know the word oral? Oral means word of mouth. Anything related to word of mouth is oral. So, for example, we use the word oral for Vedic tradition. Vedic tradition is only an oral tradition. Do you know that? That Vedic tradition is an oral tradition? And Vedas were not supposed to be written down. It was prohibited. They said Vedas are not to be written down. Giti, Shigri, Shirahkampi, लिखितपाठकः अपि पापी भवति प्रत्यवायो लभ्यते राइट प्रत्यवायः लिखितपाठकः न मास्तु so you should not read out from the written Veda was the tradition, right? Why was the tradition? लिखा हुआ वेद को पढ़ने से क्या होता है? प्रत्यवाय तो मिलता है, वो छोड़ दीजिए. गलती क्या है उसमें? नरक में जाएंगे, है ना? मूर्ख हो जाएंगे. क्यों? अच्छा. ओके. ये तो स्वर क्या है? वेद में स्वर क्या है? श्रुति में स्वर है ना? स्वर क्या है? वो स्वर क्यों? उच्चारण. लौकिक में स्वर होता है क्या? बंगाली में स्वर होता है क्या? बंगाली में उदात्त अनुदात्त स्वर इत्यादि होते हैं क्या? हाँ, इंग्लिश में नहीं होते. अच्छा, मैं बंगाली तो नहीं जानता हूँ, इसलिए बंगाली एग्जाम्पल देना मुझे कठिनाई होगा मेरे लिए, मगर हिंदी में देता हूँ. मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, है ना? मैं घर जा रहा हूँ. मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये अलग है ना? मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये अलग है. मैं घर जा रहा हूँ. ये उससे भी अलग है। मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये भी उससे अलग है। मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये उससे भी अलग है। मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये भी अलग है। मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, ये तो अच्छा है, ये सबसे अच्छा है। बहुत बढ़िया, बहुत बढ़िया। हाँ हाँ, बहुत समझदार है, समझदार है ना। हाँ, मैं घर भी जा रहा हूँ और ये भी कर रहा हूँ, मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, इनके ऊपर जोर भी दे रहा हूँ, हर एक शब्द के ऊपर ज़्यादा जोर दे रहा हूँ ना। और उसमें एक प्रश्नवाचक स्वर भी रख रहा हूँ। मैं घर जा रहा हूँ, इसमें एक प्रश्नवाचक स्वर है ना। ये सभी भाषाओं में होता है, बोल रहे हैं ना। ये भी बंगाली में होता है, इंग्लिश में होता है, संस्कृत में होता है, लौकिक संस्कृत में भी होता है। वही वेद में स्वर है, जिसको हम स्वर बोलते हैं ना, वह स्वर यही है। अगर स्वर को बदल दिए, चेंज कर दिए, तो अर्थ दूसरा बन जाता है, इसलिए। राइट? काकू, हम्म, काकू है ना। ये काकू और वेदों में जो स्वर है एक ही तरीके के हैं, एक प्रकार एक ही है। वेद में जो स्वर है वह काकू, काकू उनमें से एक है। इंटोनेशन बोलते हैं इसको। ये इंटोनेशन जो है, इंटोनेशन में काकू एक तरह का इंटोनेशन है। वेद में जो स्वर है वह भी स्वर ही है, इंटोनेशन ही है। इंटोनेशन में एक तरह का इंटोनेशन काकू है ना। हम एक कथा भी सुनते हैं वेद के बारे में, इंद्र शत्रुवधस्व, राइट? देयर व्हाट हैपेंस? Only because that swara has changed, whether it is Vrutrasura or it is Indra who has to die, it is decided, right? So it is the same what is happening in our languages. So don't be under imagination that स्वर कुछ अलग ही चीज़ है। कुछ स्वर तो वेदों में जो स्वर है वह तो कुछ मैजिकल, सुपर नेचुरल, मांत्रिक है। ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है। स्वर भी भाषा में हम जब बोलते हैं इंटोनेशन रखते हैं, वैसा ही एक इंटोनेशन है। मगर जब शब्द निकला वेद बनकर, अपौरुषेय बनकर, ब्रह्मर्षि से श्रुत होकर अंदर से निकला, तो स्वर के साथ निकला। अगर हम उस स्वर को चेंज कर देते हैं तो जिस अर्थ से वह निकला है, जिस अर्थ शब्द के रूप लेकर निकला है, वह बदल जाएगा। इसलिए उसको प्रिजर्व करना है, संरक्षित रखना है। अगर संरक्षित रखना है तो लिख नहीं सकते, लिखने में यह चला जाता है। वो तो टेप रिकॉर्डर नहीं था उन दिनों में। अगर टेप रिकॉर्डर भी होता तो उसकी क्षमता कम होता है स्वर को रक्षित रखने में। एक मानव उच्चारण ही उसको रक्षित रख सकता है। इसलिए स्वर को रक्षित रखने के लिए, स्वर को रक्षित रखकर उसके द्वारा अर्थ को रक्षित रखने के लिए, जिस अर्थ शब्द का रूप लेकर निकला था उसको रक्षित रखने के लिए स्वर का रक्षण हुआ था, शब्द का रक्षण हुआ था। शिक्षा, वेदांग शिक्षा, इसीलिए उसको रक्षित रखा था, है ना। दैट इज वाई वेदास हैव बीन ओरल। नॉट ओनली वेदास, थ्रूआउट द वर्ल्ड देयर हैव बीन मेनी ओरल ट्रेडिशंस, not only here in Africa or South America or any traditional society. Whenever I mention South America and Africa, don't think that I am not mentioning North America. What is the history of North America? That is USA, what we call USA. What is its history? it is only a very recent society. All these people went there only some 400 years ago. Before that, there was no such country called, nation called USA. So, whenever we talk about traditional societies, we cannot mention them because that is not a traditional society. It is only a newly formed colony. It's only a newly formed society. So, whenever we think of traditional societies, we have to think of either China or Africa or South America. Even in South America, not those who have been changed into Spanish people by conversion into Christianity and all that. The original Mayans who used to live in South America, original Aztecs who used to live in South America, they are the traditional people, traditional society. Even in Egypt we had traditional society, but that traditional society no longer exists today because they have been converted into Islam today. We talk of pyramids, right? And those pyramids people are no longer there. The pharaohs to whom the pyramids belong, those pharaohs are no longer there. That society, that pharaoh included society, pyramid people's society, no longer exists. They have been converted into Islam. That is why we are not able to talk of that traditional society. But even that traditional society was there. Greco-Roman traditional society, that is Greeks, that was a traditional society. Unfortunately, that does not exist today. They have been converted into Christianity. Roman traditional society was there, but that no longer exists today. They have all been, Italians have been converted into Christianity. So, whenever we talk of traditional, we immediately remember only South Africans or Chinese, Indians. Anyway, we are traditional people. So, along with us, whichever traditional society is there, they have oral traditions. We can consider Vedas to be part of all the oral traditions of the world. We need not consider that Vedas are something very, very special. They are very special, but they are very special among the comparable oral traditions. It does not mean that whenever we compare things with other countries and their traditions and their literatures, we should not think that we are degrading our literature or degrading Vedas or anything like that. Their speciality of Vedas does exist, but it exists within all the oral traditions. Okay, so all these oral traditions, we have oral traditions even in India. If you go to villages, they have oral epics which have been preserved from hundreds of years. There are all kinds of oral traditions. So, when you talk of oral traditions, it's huge. The size of the oral traditions is so huge that if you go on documenting these oral traditions, it's not even easy to document the whole amount of corpus of the oral traditions that we have. And those oral traditions also have been preserved only in oral form because they know that writing down does not help preserve the original flavor, original nuances, all the details, all the meticulous feelings and emotions that are preserved in it. So they thought, okay, let it be just oral. And they have been preserved in an oral form only. In Sanskrit, you know that oral tradition has been continued even into literature. Laukika Sanskrita also. Laukika Sanskrita also has been an oral tradition. And Laukika Sanskrita, Shastra Adhyayana Adhyapana was also oral. It was also not written. It was also not a written tradition. Since signatures are going on, let me make a small announcement in the middle. Just now, this person was asking me to include his name into an email list called Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad. Shaival's name has been included into that to help him in his research so that he can ask for books and all that. Then Shaival informed him and he asked me to include his name into the list then I said that I can include everyone's name, because in the hostel, if he spreads that his name has been included, they may think that I have been biased. I favored only some. So I am making this announcement. Whoever is interested in joining that email list is open to join. If you are interested in joining, when the paper goes around, you just take that paper beside your signature, or take another separate sheet. Mention your name and give your email ID there. I will enter all these email IDs into that email list and approve your applications to join the email list. From the next moment onwards, you will start getting emails from that email list. There will be discussions going on in that. People will be asking, most of the questions will be asking for books only. Somebody will ask for the copy of some Vyakhyana of some book, and the copies of books only, mostly they keep asking. And sometimes there is a small discussion about words, etymologies, shastras and all that. So if you are interested, you can join. You can give your email IDs on a separate sheet of paper if you want. I'll add all your email IDs to that. So when I saw the paper for attendance signature going around, I thought I should do that. Okay. Is there a separate sheet of paper which you can circulate among all these? So you can just send another separate sheet where you can put your name and email ID, which I will add. Particularly for MPhil and PhD students, that is going to be especially helpful for seeking information, for seeking guidance from many scholars that are around and all that. So that's your will and wish. There is no force for you to join, because Shaival has joined, and what's your name? Krishnapati has Krishna Pada has joined. Krishna Pada and Shaival have joined. So in future, if you come to know that they have joined, you may think that there is some secret arrangement. So I wanted to tell you that there is nothing secret about it. You can also join. All of you can join the list and get help from that. Okay. So now, oral traditions are all over the world, and Sanskrit has preserved the oral tradition in the form of Laukika Sanskrita also. And not only Laukika Sanskrita, even Shastra Parampara, Adhyayana Adhyapana Parampara was also purely oral. In the ancient time, they did not take help of the written books even for Shastra Adhyayana Adhyapana. And you can see this in the expressions used in Sanskrit. When you speak Sanskrit, etad uchyate, etad shruyate, right? You never say etad likhyate, etad likhitam labhyate. This expression is not there. We always say idam shruyate, idam shruyate eva. So this is how it is heard. It is, we always say this is how it is heard, this is how it is said, but we never say this is how it is written. This is how it is found written. Okay. So Sanskrit expression itself has incorporated in itself that oral idea. It is always oral. The tradition has been oral. This has been preserved. And that orality is there even in folk traditions, rural traditions, folk songs. You know folk songs? Folk songs जानते हैं ना? लोक गीत जानते हैं ना? लोक गीत भी oral है. लोक संप्रदाय, लोक परंपरा, लोक संस्कृति oral है. सब कुछ oral है. पूरी दुनिया में ऐसे ही थी. The whole world was oral once upon a time. And gradually people started learning writing, how to write. Scripts came into existence. Among millions of languages that we have in the world, okay, let me not use exaggerated millions, let me say thousands of languages at least that we have in the whole world, only very few countable languages have script. Maybe a few tens of languages only have script. But all the remaining thousands of languages in the world, they do not have script at all, but still they are languages. Still they have their oral traditions. And the languages in which there is writing today, they are also, the languages in which there is writing today also, they had oral traditions only, writing came later. In India, if you see when writing came into existence, it's very, very late compared to the existence of oral traditions in India. This written literature is called literate literature. We use the word literate. And a person who can write is called a literate person. And we use the word literacy today in a very highly government language, political language. Literacy, lack of literacy, literate, illiterate. But here in our studies of knowledge systems, in Indology, in subjects like this, in your university studies, the word literacy does not mean literacy of the people, lack of literacy of the people, that. No, we are talking of literate cultures. A culture where writing is used is called a literate culture. A society where writing is used is called a literate society. Okay. For example, all the civilized societies can be called today, all the civilized societies are literate societies. Today, modern time, contemporarily. It does not mean that all the people in that society know read and writing. No, it is not a political term. It's not a government term that we are using. For example, you can say that in ancient time, the Vedic society was not a in the ancient time, Vedic society was not a literate society, not literary. Literary is different. Vedic society was not a literate society. This word literate has no positive value attributed to it. If we say that it was not a literate society, it does not mean that it was not a knowledgeable society, it did not have knowledge, it was not intelligent, nothing of that sort. The word literate has no value, positive value into it. It just means that they did not use writing. It was an oral society, it was not a literate society. Okay? And traditionally, even today, in villages, we have Vedic scholars, in agraharas, in Brahmin villages, and even in towns where some traditional Vedic scholars we see, they are oral people and they are not literate. They do not know to read or write. There is no literacy to them. Even in government language, they do not have literacy. But are they scholars? Are they scholars? Can we call Vedic scholars as scholars or not? Of course, they are scholars. And there were traditional scholars, Shastra scholars in Nyaya, Mimamsa, Vyakarana, Alankara Shastra, or any Shastra. They were not literate. That means they did not know to read or write. They did not want to read or write also. Were they intelligent? If they were not intelligent, we are not at all. Right? If at all there was anything that was intelligence, only they had. Extraordinarily intelligent people. So, literacy is not a measure of intelligence. Literacy is not a measure of level of knowledge. Literacy is not a measure of level of scholarship. It was never in any oral society, not only in India, in oral societies, literacy was not an index of development or culture or civilization or any such thing. Today, because it's a modern society, it is depending on writing and reading. Literacy has become a measure of development. So government gives reports, 100% literacy, 60% literacy, 70% literacy, and we think, oh, that whole society is now developed society because there is literacy there. But literacy, even today, in my understanding, literacy is not a development index of development at all. They know to read and write does not mean that they are a developed society. That's a civilized society. That's a highly cultured society or highly civilized, scholarly society or anything like that. There can be a literate fool, a literate idiot, a literate scoundrel, a literate stupid. Right? Literacy is not a measure of being clever or intelligent or scholarly or any such thing. If you go to ancient period in India, there were inscriptions, stone inscriptions or pillar edicts, stone edicts, wall edicts that were made during Mauryan times, you know that. Those edicts were chiseled by uneducated scribes. Those scribes were not educated. They were not scholars. Scholars or some educated person was standing and dictating the matter because they knew how to make shapes in stone and pillars. They were doing that. So inscriptions, there is a specialized subject called epigraphy as part of history. They study that. They specialize in how to read inscriptions, how to study inscriptions. And if you go to epigraphists, if you ask them how they study inscriptions, they will tell you that while studying inscriptions, they come across lots of scribal errors. There are lots of mistakes there. It is all because that person who was the scribe, who was inscribing on the stone, was not a scholarly person at all. Whereas the person who was dictating was a little educated. And the scholars, for example, the poets, Kalidasa, probably did not know how to write. Probably he knew to read, but he did not know how to write, because writing those days was a very special skill. Palm leaves, for example, on which writing was done, it's a special art to write on palm leaves. There was a stylus that was used to scribe on palm leaves. It's a metal which has a sharp edge, a small metal piece. And if you just put that metal piece, sharp metal piece on the palm leaf, it completely breaks. Palm leaf is like that. So if you should not press it beyond a point, you should press it only to an extent, and you can only make a dot using that. And just as you see on steel objects nowadays, when they write, what is done is only dots are put. There is a continuous line of dots that is made into a letter there. Similar thing happens in palm leaves also. Dots are put, and these dots are made into a particular letter, a particular script symbol, and that is an art. And to do that with the speed of a machine that is being used in a steel shop, where you make your letters on the steel material, that they were doing it at that speed. Humans were able to do that at that speed. Some scholar was dictating and they were writing on the palm leaf. So that was a special art and special skill. And this person who writes need not be a scholar. He was an uneducated person. He was just sometimes educated also, but it was not necessary for him to be a scholar. So the scholar was dictating and he was writing. So there was a disparity between literacy and education. Literates were not educated, educates were not literates. So literacy was not a measure of index of development, index of civilization, index of knowledge, index of scholarliness. These are highly important for you when you think of ancient India. If people tell you that, see, all these masses were kept illiterate by the scholars, all such political statements, if you hear, you have to respond, scholars themselves were illiterate. Do you know this? Remember, scholars themselves were illiterate. How can they keep others illiterate? They themselves were illiterate. They were not reading or writing. So, it is a false allegation to say that people were kept as illiterate people. Everyone was illiterate at that time. Okay? And another allegation that comes through this misunderstanding is that why were, for example, dictionaries like Amarakosha were in the form of verse, meter, chandas, shlokas. Usual misunderstanding is that people wanted to preserve it as a secret. Only a certain caste or community, some Brahmins, wanted to preserve these dictionaries as a secret. That is why they kept them in the form of shlokas, because only they can recite the shlokas. That is why they preserved it in the form of shlokas. But the fact is that all over the world, knowledge was preserved only in the form of singable material, musical material. Oral traditions were not preserved in prose form. No oral traditions were preserved in prose form. Prose is not suitable to preserve oral traditions. Only musical materials are well preserved in oral traditions. They can sing and make others sing. Remember. So, shloka, chandas, meter, prosody, this verse form was used for preserving knowledge those days because they wanted to memorize. They wanted to memorize. So, shloka, meter, verse was a memorization tool. What was that? It was a memorization tool. Amarakosha was in shloka form only because it was a memorization tool. They thought it can be memorized. Because there was no print, for example. The printed book was not there. Alphabetical order is not followed. Alphabetical order is required only when there is print. Because there is print, because you are able to turn the pages, you want to go to a page and find your word, the best way is there has to be some sequence. Thus, that sequence is alphabetical order. That is why, because you are visually, with your eyes, you are looking at the book, printed book. And you are searching visually. Because of that, you have to follow alphabetical order. But in oral tradition, because the so-called dictionary, we call it kosha, is being preserved in the form of a book of synonyms. You know the word synonym? Synonyms are words with the same meaning, different words with the same meaning. Amarakosha is a book of synonyms. And today, dictionaries which give you synonyms are called thesaurus. You know this word? Thesaurus. You know this word? Thesaurus. 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 Thesaurus is a dictionary of synonyms. Thesaurus. People use thesaurus even today. People use books of synonyms even today. There is a great use of synonyms for you. If you are a writer, if you don't want to bore your readers with the same word being repeated in that meaning, so you want to use varieties of words in that meaning for beauty. So you want to have a thesaurus so that you know a different word for that. If you are a poet, you are in need of synonyms more. So you want to consult a thesaurus. And there is a great use of learning synonyms and thesaurus, using thesaurus for powerful writing. When you are writing powerfully, there are many, many uses of having synonyms with you. If you want to express something powerfully, go on adding synonyms, then it gives a powerful effect. That's another use. And when you consult thesaurus or when you consult book of synonyms, if you know specific meaning of every synonym, that gives you accuracy of meaning. That's another use of thesaurus. So these are all uses of thesaurus. People use thesaurus even today. Synonyms books are used. Amarakosha is a book of synonyms. It's a thesaurus that was created, but that was in a verse form. Not only Amarakosha, Ganita books, books on horses, Ashwalakshana Shastra, Khadga Lakshana Shastra. There were books on swords. They were called Khadga Lakshana Shastra. There was books on how to locate water, where water is there. That is called Jalargala Shastra. Do you know these Shastras? If you do not know, make note. If I were you, if I was a young man like you, I would have said, hey, sir, I want to make a note. Oh, what is this? Khadga Lakshana Shastra? Wonderful. What is the use of a Khadga Lakshana Shastra? That king or a prince used to go to the market to buy a Khadga. Which kind of Khadga should be purchased? What qualities are good qualities of Khadga? How are those Khadgas made? All that is described in Khadga Lakshana Shastra. Ashva Lakshana Shastra, I go to the market to buy a horse. And how to buy a good horse? Do you know that there is a whole indigenous knowledge system of how to buy cows? These agriculturists, farmers, when they go to the market to buy cows and bulls, they have the whole science there. Their elders tell them how to locate a good cow. There are actually on the hair of the cows, there are wools. You know, virils means circles are formed. Hair forms into circles. Hair forms into circles like this. Such circles are called virils. In water also you have whirls. There is whirl pool. Okay. So these are there in hair of the animals, cows, horses, sheep, goat. When people go to buy sheep or goat or cows or bulls, they look for these things because they have beliefs around that. Where it has to be there, where it should not be there. There is a samudrika of the body of a horse and all that. So, and they have features. Where eyes have to be located, where ears are to be located, what should be the distance between ears and the eyes, and all that. So, and what are the symptoms of tiresomeness of a horse? When can we say that the horse is tired? When it is going to sit down? And how can we control the horse? All that. That is, it is also called as Ashva Hridaya. To understand the heart of the Ashva, that is called Ashva Hridaya and Ashva Lakshana Shastra. They needed it those days because they were handling horses, they needed that. And there was Hasti Ayurveda, veterinary science for elephants. Hasti Ayurveda. There was Vriksha Ayurveda. Traditional agricultural science was there in Vriksha Ayurveda. There was Pushpa Ayurveda. Pushpa Ayurveda, which used to deal with things like aromatherapy, how to use flowers for treatment, medical treatment, and all that. That was there in Pushpa Ayurveda. There was Dhanurveda. it is called an Upaveda, we know, but it did not only deal with how to use a dhanush and all that, it was also talking about strategies. War strategies are also described inside Dhanurveda books. Okay. There are many such subjects in Indic knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge systems. Jalargala Shastra was the one I was mentioning, how to locate water. Go to farmers, you will be able to understand. That is a very big problem for them. They fall after people. Please tell me where I can locate water.
nowadays जो लोग नलकूप को बिठाते हैं ना,
हाँ हाँ
वो लोग को पता है किधर पानी मिलेगा,
हाँ
तो वो लोग बोलते हैं कि हम एक दिन पूछे तो आपको कैसे पता है,
हाँ
आपको पता है, तुमको ऐसे और चीज पता है, हमको ऐसे ही बता।
हाँ, वो उनको डिवाइनर्स बोलते हैं, वाटर डिवाइनर्स। इंग्लिश में उन लोगों को वाटर डिवाइनर्स बोलते हैं। that activity is called water divination. Water divination. They are believed to have some supernatural power to locate water, where water is located. But actually it is not a supernatural power. It is all well documented in a Shastra called Jalargala Shastra. Jalargala Shastra. They have their own traditional methods. For example, if there is a neem tree here, and from the neem tree at this distance, if there is a palm tree, at such a distance of neem tree and palm tree, there is water located. And there in another shloka it says, if goats are allowed to freely graze, if there is a water spot, they collect around in a circle form. So whenever freely left goats left for grazing, if they sit in a circle form at a certain spot, at the center of this there can be water. There is a great possibility of being water. All this is located there. So some such indications these water diviners also use, and they use some stick in a Y shape, and they hold it in their hands and see the response of that Y shaped stick. Branch of a tree also. They use even coconuts and response of coconut when it is freely left in the finger. All these are part of the Jalargala Shastra knowledge only. But that's what I am saying. Everything is not there in that book, that written book Jalargala Shastra. Most of the knowledge of these water diviners comes orally from their elders. From the family elders or their gurus and all that, they learn it as an intuition. They learn it as an intuition. There were many shastras like that. All these shastras were in verse form. Whenever they wanted to document the shastra, they documented in verse form, in shloka form. Why were they preserving it in shloka form? If there is a misunderstanding, people can easily tell you that they wanted to preserve it, secretly hide it, but the actual reason is they wanted to memorize. They wanted to memorize. The shlokas are musical. Chandas means just music. So shlokas are musical, so it is easy to remember music, it is easy to remember rhythm. That is why they preserved it in the form of shlokas. It is not the explanation only for Sanskrit. All over the world it is like that. All the oral societies preserved their knowledge systems in oral forms only, in the form of songs, in the form of singable material. It always happened only like that. Okay. And even today, if you go to villages, the oral traditions in say Bengali or Oriya or any language are preserved by only a certain community. There are specialized communities for specialized oral songs, and there are castes, and for each caste, that caste story is preserved in an oral form, and a specific caste only sings the songs of that caste, and they go to the families of that caste and they patronize them, they give them grain, they give them food, and this particular performing art community, they go to the patrons coming from a specific community only. And there are other performing artists of rural areas, they go to entire village also, they patronize them. But the performers belong only to a particular community. One specific community preserves a particular performing art only. It's not only here. If you go to Africa, a particular oral tradition is preserved only by a particular, they don't call it caste, by a particular section, a particular community within that tribe, they preserve it. All over the world it is like that. So, when we see that Brahmins were preserving the Vedas, it was part of the same system. That every occupation was specialized in a certain community. And in a caste, in every caste, a particular caste occupation was a right come duty. Right means, right, you know, it's my right. अधिकार, मेरा ही अधिकार है. घट बनाने का अधिकार किसको है? कुम्हार को ही होता है. 100% कुम्हार का राइट होता है वह ऑक्यूपेशन. That occupation is reserved, 100% reservation for कुम्हार in that area. सोनार का भी 100% रिजर्वेशन है. गोल्ड पर काम करने का सोनार का अधिकार है. सोनार ही कर सकता है, कोई दूसरा नहीं करना. अगर ग्राम में कोई और करता है तो उसको पनिशमेंट दिया जाएगा, दंड दिया जाएगा. ऐसा था. सो अधिकार था, राइट था हर एक ऑक्यूपेशन पर. राइट का मतलब है ड्यूटी भी. अगर कुम्हार को अधिकार दिया गया घट बनाने में, वो नहीं बनाता है तो क्या होगा? लोगों को नहीं मिलेंगे ना. इसलिए वह उसका क्या जिम्मेदारी भी बनता है ना. जब 100% रिजर्वेशन एक ऑक्यूपेशन का एक कैस्ट में होता है तो वह उसका ड्यूटी भी होता है. इसलिए हम बोलते हैं राइट कम ड्यूटी. ऑल ऑक्यूपेशंस वर राइट कम ड्यूटी. दे वर राइट कम ड्यूटी. राइट कम ड्यूटी मीन्स right is duty, duty is right. It is at the same time both. Every caste occupation was the right come duty of the caste people. So, to preserve certain oral traditions, folk songs, certain folk epics or big stories in the form of folk songs was the right come duty of a certain caste in that village. Only that caste used to sing the song and no other caste. That was its occupation. It was the right come duty of that caste. Even today, if you go to villages all over India, you find such castes. They say, यह हमारा अधिकार है, कोई और इसका गाना नहीं कर सकता है. And village preserves it. Village heads preserve it. If anyone else from any other caste, for example, हजाम, you know हजाम, हेयर कट करने वाला, हाँ क्या बोलते हैं उसको? Barber. It's a caste. Nair, Nai, Napi, whatever you call him, that's a caste, right? And if any other person cuts the hair, he is punished. दंड दिया जाएगा उनको. Okay. If a hair cutting caste person makes pots, he is given punishment. If a potter cuts the hair, he is given punishment. If a potter does not make pots, he is given punishment. If a hair cutting person does not cut hair, rejects to cut hair, he is given punishment. Right भी है, ड्यूटी भी है. इसलिए कि जब राइट दिया जाता है, तुम नहीं करते हो तो लोगों को कठिनाई होगा ना. इसलिए वह ड्यूटी भी होता है, ऐसा था। जब इसको हम राइट कम ड्यूटी बोलते हैं, वेद रिसाइट करने का भी ब्राह्मणों में, वेद पंडितों में एक राइट कम ड्यूटी था। अगर ब्राह्मण बोलता है कि मैं वेद नहीं पाठ करता हूँ, स्वाध्याय नहीं करता हूँ, तो दंड दिया जाता था। और कौन वेद रिसाइट कर सकता है? ब्राह्मण ही कर सकता है, ऐसा राइट भी था। यह कैस्ट सिस्टम के अंदर था। वह 100% रिजर्वेशन सिस्टम था, हर एक ऑक्यूपेशन 100% रिजर्व था उसमें, हर एक कैस्ट के लिए, उसके अंदर था ये सब। सो ओरल ट्रेडिशंस वेयर numerous, and all the oral traditions were preserved as a specialization of caste occupation only. They thought that if you learn anything from the birth, from your parents, from your relatives at home, you will turn out to be highly professional in that occupation. So carpentry, for example, when you learn it from your second year, third year of your age, actually you are learning it right from your location in your mother's womb, because while you are in your mother's womb also you are able to hear all that, right? So you know, when you come out, when you make the same sound, you remember, yeah, that's what I heard when I in my mother's womb also. So it comes, that knowledge comes from that level, and it is inbuilt into you, and there is every possibility that you get a great skill in that occupation. That's what they thought. If you don't like caste system, you can throw it out today, and we have already thrown it out any case. Actually, no one is following the traditional caste occupation of any caste. Brahmins are doing, they are running auto rickshaws, Brahmins are sweeping, Brahmins are cutting hair, Brahmins are making pots, maybe in a factory, but they are making pots. The Brahmins are going as IT people, Brahmins are in army, Brahmins सब कुछ कर रहे हैं, है ना? हर एक कैस्ट हर एक काम कर रहा है आजकल. Caste occupations are no longer preserved, but when it was there, what was there, why it was there, the spirit, we are trying to understand that spirit. Today, it's not that we have to preserve that system and it should continue. We are not arguing for that. We are only trying to understand what was happening at that time. So these oral traditions were preserved as a right cum duty of a certain community. There were many oral traditions and they were all preserved by them. And from oral tradition, then they were to be brought into literate traditions later, and they were trying to take care that all the qualities of the oral tradition have to be preserved as much as possible, in as greater detail as possible, as meticulously, as many micro details as possible. They have to be very carefully preserved, and for that they wanted to evolve some systems of script, and they tried their best to do that. But no one can completely preserve all the features of oral tradition in a written tradition, in a literate tradition. But today, what I wanted to tell you is, in the West, where we think the society is literate, not oral, only India was oral society, only Eastern societies, we call Eastern societies as Oriental societies. Okay? The word Oriental means Eastern, Eastern societies. प्राच्य देश, प्राच्य मुल्क, प्राच्य राष्ट्र, पूर्वी, पूर्वी राष्ट्र, पूर्व के देश, इनको ओरिएंटल सोसाइटीज बोलते हैं. ओके, सो we have an imagination that Oriental societies only, Eastern societies only, like India, China, all this, these we call Eastern societies, Japan, all this. Only these are oral societies, and Western societies have been literate all the time. It's not. Even there, societies were oral. Originally they were oral only. They shifted into literate culture, that is writing culture, literacy culture, only later. That is why there are books on these two concepts, orality and literacy. When you go to internet, you search for books on orality and literacy. You will get lots of books on this concept of orality and literacy. They have studied their own cultures from this point of view. For example, we were talking about Homer and his epic Odyssey, Iliad, and when they saw the publication, the printed version of Odyssey, they started saying that this actually is the printed version of the literate tradition of Odyssey, and that literate version, written version of Odyssey, tried to preserve the oral version of Odyssey. Homer, do you know, was a blind beggar. He was a blind beggar. And he was singing this song called Odyssey, and that was later documented in a literary form. So, what happened from his oral recitation of Odyssey to the literate tradition has been studied extensively in this orality and literacy studies. By the scholars who specialized in orality and literacy, they studied extensively this aspect of what happened to the oral version of Odyssey from Homer, original Homer's oral recitation. He did not write it down, he only orally recited it. And what happened when it came into the written form has been extensively studied by them. Not only Homer, a huge amount of European literature was originally only oral, and how it came into written form and what happened between the oral aspect and the written aspect of that book has been extensively studied. And there are theories about it, there are formulae about it, there are rules about what happens. Extensive studies have happened. And later in the same tradition of these books, somebody talked about what happens to books when they are brought from either oral to print or written to print. That book was called Technologizing the Word. Technologizing the Word. Word, W-O-R-D, word, not W-O-R-L-D, world. I am not talking about world. Word, W-O-R-D, the word, technologizing the word, means how literature, which was either oral or written, was brought into print form. What happened during the printing? What happened during the invention of printing? What happened during the execution of printing? What happened during the introduction of printing? What happens actually in that process? That all such details are discussed in this book, Technologizing the Word. It belongs to the same branch of studies called Orality and Literacy Studies. It's a specialized branch, mostly anthropologists, folklorists, linguists, anthropological linguists, such people are interested in orality and literacy studies. But that's very important for any literature student in general, particularly Sanskrit literature student. You must know these things, that there are studies like that. People are specializing in that. They have done huge amount of specialized study about these topics. There are books about this. You should know that, and you should read these books before understanding Sanskrit literature better, because even Valmiki Ramayana was only an oral book. It came into writing only later. Most of the Sanskrit literature was originally only in the form of oral literature. Later only it came into written form. So if you study these books on orality and literacy that have been published, you will be immensely benefited to study what could have happened to Ramayana or Mahabharata or Bhagavata or any Purana probably when it was in an oral form, how, when it was brought into written form, and what happened in between from its oral aspect and oral existence and written existence. All these details you can study. So that opens up a new area of thinking in your minds. Please remember that you can do a lot by looking at books from that point of view. Many books were, for example, we talk of Ayurveda. Lot of Ayurveda knowledge was only in an oral form. Only later it was brought into written form. And what happens during this process of bringing something from oral form to the written form? And we, probably your teachers have already introduced this word to you, पाठांतर. We use the word पाठांतर. इसका एक और भी पाठांतर है. इस प्रति में एक और मातृका में और एक पाठांतर मिलता है. ये पाठांतर that exists for oral traditions also. Actually, in fact, Pathantar problem is more for oral traditions than written traditions. Because at least in written traditions, there is some preservation of some version in a fixed form, it gets fixed. But in oral forms, what happens is somebody learns the song from someone and changes it, introduces his own changes. So, whenever you collect an oral epic, that is oral kavya, an oral katha or something like that, go from place to place, you will find lots of differences between one village version to the other village's version, one singer's version to the other singer's version. These are also pathantar only, right? वेद के बारे में भी लोग बोलते हैं, कोई पुरोहित मंत्र बोलने में थोड़ा सा फर्क कर देता है, थोड़ा सा व्यत्यास कर देता है, तो बोलते हैं यह आपका पाठ है क्या, हमारे पाठ में यह नहीं है. इसका मतलब है पाठांतर है. हाँ, अपने गुरु पौरोहित्य में, स्मार्त में अपने गुरु जो थे वे हमको ऐसे ही बताए हैं, यही पाठ हमारे पठन पाठन में अपने स्वाध्याय में रह गया है. इसका मतलब है पाठांतर उसमें भी होता है, पौरोहित्य में भी होता है, मंत्रों में भी होता है, पाठांतर होता है. ये पाठांतरों का अध्ययन करना कैसे करना, टेक्सचुअल क्रिटिसिज्म में. आप लोगों को टेक्सचुअल क्रिटिसिज्म सिखाया गया है ना. टेक्सचुअल क्रिटिसिज्म, मातृका, ओरिजिनल, क्रिटिकल एडिशन कैसे बनाना, ये सब मैन्यूस्क्रिप्टोलॉजी में. ये तो रिटन ट्रेडिशन का पाठांतरों का अध्ययन हो गया, मगर ओरल ट्रेडिशंस का भी इसी तरह पाठांतरों का अध्ययन होता है. और ओरल ट्रेडिशन और रिटन ट्रेडिशन के बीच भी पाठांतरों का अध्ययन होना पड़ता है. एक ओरल ट्रेडिशन और दूसरा ओरल ट्रेडिशन ऑफ द सेम काव्य, इनके बीच का भी अध्ययन होना चाहिए. एक काव्य का ओरल ट्रेडिशन और रिटन ट्रेडिशन के बीच में भी पाठांतर का अध्ययन होना चाहिए. ये सब होने की आवश्यकता है. हम जो कर रहे हैं मैन्युस्क्रिप्टोलॉजी में, एक रिटन ट्रेडिशन का ही कंपैरिजन कर रहे हैं, मगर बोलिए एक ओरल वर्जन दूसरा ओरल वर्जन के बीच भी कंपैरिजन, ओरल वर्जन और रिटन वर्जन के बीच में भी कंपैरिजन करने की आवश्यकता होता है. ये सब करने से ज़्यादा अध्ययन हो सकता है, हमको नए तथ्य सामने आ सकते हैं, है ना. ये सब करना है, इसके लिए मटेरियल है, इसके लिए स्टडीज हुए हैं. ओके, सो let us stop at orality. With regard to orality and literacy, I have just introduced these concepts. There are scholars like Wolfgang Meeder. Wolfgang Meeder is considered a good scholar in this area. Wolf, you know Wolf, Wolfgang Meeder, M-E-I-D-E-R, Meeder. M-E-I-D-E-R. Michaelopholy, another name, Michael, M-I-C-H-E-L, Michael, or apostrophe. They use this word to say off, coming from a village. And then folly, F-O-L-E-Y, Michaelopholy. Some names, but there are many other scholars also who have studied in this area. Best thing is first go to a Wikipedia page about this scholar, and there will be many links to that, and you can go from there to many other books and scholars and authors and all that. You can do a lot of search. Just start with some small Wikipedia page and then you can go into this area. There is a lot of material available on that. So now let me go to the next topic, text. This concept of text and context, text context. Incidentally, there is a rhyming, there is a sound similarity, text, and in context also, incidentally there is text. So people use this as a pair, text context all the time. This has come into existence because we, in folk literature, in folk songs, in folklore, people in the beginning were collecting only the song, folk songs. And they started studying those folk songs without actually knowing where is it sung, by whom is it sung, what is the tradition, actual tradition of singing that song. They just went on studying those songs, and from the material inside those songs, they started concluding about what it is all about. Let me give you an example. बंगाली में एक लोकगीत हमको मिलता है जिसमें एक आदमी बोलता है, एक औरत बोलता है. आदमी के शब्द होते हैं, औरत के भी शब्द होते हैं. एक ही सॉन्ग में, एक ही लोकगीत में आदमी के बात और औरत के बात होते हैं. ऐसा एक लोकगीत हमको मिलता है तो हम उसको देखकर बोलते हैं कि हाँ यह एक युगल गीत है, रोमांटिक सॉन्ग है. गाँवों में एक औरत और एक आदमी आपस में ऐसे ही गाते बैठते हैं, ये हमको समाचार इससे मिल रहा है, ऐसा बोल देते हैं. जब गांव में जाकर देखते हैं तो यह लोग इसी लोकगीत को एक आदमी और एक औरत गाते नहीं हैं, एक ही आदमी गाते रहता है. एक ही आदमी के गीत में दोनों होते हैं, औरत का और आदमी का होता है. यह गलत इंफॉर्मेशन हो गया ना. देखकर, टेक्स्ट को देखकर हम समझ गए कि वह युगल गीत है, और उसमें ऐसा होता है जो आदमी गा रहा है उसमें वह तो एग्रीकल्चरिस्ट है, फार्मर है. जो औरत गा रही है उसमें वह हो गया पशुपालक, पशुपालिका औरत है. हम समझते हैं कि हाँ गाँव में ऐसे ही चलता है, एक फार्मर और एक पशुपालिका आपस में प्यार करते रहते हैं और प्यार के गीत गाते रहते हैं. मगर यह जब जाकर के देखते हैं तो ऐसा नहीं चल रहा है. गांव में यह एक ही आदमी बैठकर गा रहा है. शाम में खेत में काम कर 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 थक जाने पर वह पी लेता है, आकर के बैठ जाता है, मज़े में गाते रहता है. उस गाने में ये रहता है, दोनों के बात रहते हैं, आदमी के बात रहते हैं, औरत के बात भी रहते हैं उसमें. यह शायद उसका स्वप्न है, यह शायद उसका ख्वाहिश है, यह शायद उसकी इच्छा है कि ऐसा चलें. कोई फार्मर और कोई पशुपालिका आपस में गाने से कितना अच्छा लगेगा, ऐसा ख्वाहिश है उसका, गा ले रहा है मज़े में, ऐसा वो गीत बन जाता है. यह जो वह आदमी खेती में काम करने के बाद शाम में आकर अपने घर में बैठकर वो पिए हुआ सा मूड में गाते रहता है, यह कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. कॉन्टेक्स्ट का मतलब जब गा रहा है, जहाँ गा रहा है, कौन गा रहा है, गाने वालों का उम्र कितना है, गाने वालों का ऑक्यूपेशन क्या है, जिस लिए गा रहा है, वो थक जाकर गा रहा है, वो थकावट को कम करने के लिए गा रहा है, ये सब कॉन्टेक्स्ट है ना। हम एक बोटमैन का गाना कलेक्ट करते हैं, उस गाने में एक वेदांत का अर्थ भी हो सकता है। उसको देखकर हम समझ सकते हैं कि एक गलतफहमी हो सकती है, मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग हो सकती है देखकर कि अरे ये तो कोई ऋषि गा रहा है, इतना अच्छा होता है वेदांत, इतना अच्छा होता है उसमें। तो हम जा कर के देखते हैं तो कोई ऋषि भी नहीं है, एक बोटमैन है। ऐसे ही सीख लिया है कि कहीं से वेदांत का गाना गाते जाता है, बाउल गीत है, बाउल से सीख लिया है और बोटमैन गा रहा है बाउल का गीत, है ना। हम समझते हैं कि अरे ये तो बाउल का गीत है, कोई बाउल गाया होगा, जा कर के देखते हैं तो एक बोटमैन गा रहा है, वह बाउल नहीं है। और जब उसमें वेदांत को देखते हैं तो अरे इतना अच्छा वेदांत है, तो हम समझ सकते हैं कि वह एक साधु होगा, उतना ज्ञानी होगा। हम जाकर के देखते हैं तो वो बाउल ही है, मगर अनपढ़ बाउल है और पीता भी है, और उसको ये वेदांत के बारे में कुछ भी पता भी नहीं है उसमें क्या है। वो पी करके बाउल बोलता है, अपने आप को बाउल भी बोलता है, रख लेता है एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट और बोलता है हाँ, गाते रहता है। जाकर के पूछें तो इसमें आप जीवात्मा के बारे में क्या बोल रहे हैं, परमात्मा के बारे में क्या वो बोलता है कि परमात्मा मिल रहा है मुझे अभी बहुत कुछ परमात्मा मिल गया है उसको, परमात्मा ज़्यादा पी लिया है, वो परमात्मा बॉटल में है, वो सब पी लिया होगा। तो हम टेक्स्ट को देखकर जो इसमें है इसके ऊपर हम कंक्लूजन में नहीं आना, निर्णय नहीं कर लेना है, जाकर के देखना है कौन गा रहा है, कहाँ गा रहा है, कैसे गा रहा है। उससे हमको पता लग जाता है कि क्यों ऐसे गाने आते हैं, उससे कल्चर कैसे है, कहाँ से कहाँ जाता है गाना, ये सब हम देख सकते हैं ना। उसको क्या बोलते हैं, कॉन्टेक्स्ट, कॉन्टेक्स्ट बोलते हैं। सो टेक्स्ट और कॉन्टेक्स्ट, हम सिर्फ टेक्स्ट कलेक्ट करने से कोई फायदा नहीं है। देयर इज नो यूज कलेक्टिंग जस्ट द टेक्स्ट, वी हैव टू कलेक्ट द context also. This applies to literature also, to Sanskrit literature also. Just looking at the text we may conclude that this is how it is, this is how it is, but we do not know when that particular text is recited, where is it recited, who recites it, how does he recite it, and where the author has given scope for an oral interpreter to interpret. For example, श्लोक जो रहता है, श्लोक में व्यास या वाल्मीकि या ओरिजिनल ऑथर प्रवचनकार के लिए जगह दिए होते हैं। यहाँ प्रवचनकार बोल देगा, मैं बोलने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, मैं बोलने की कोई आवश्यकता नहीं है, इस सोच से छोड़ दिए होंगे, इसको हम पकड़ लेना है। यहाँ इसलिए नहीं कहा गया है कि व्यास या वाल्मीकि या कोई भी हो, उस पुराण का रचयिता, वह प्रवचनकार के लिए जगह दिया गया है और प्रवचनकार ऐड कर सकता है वहाँ। तो ये टेक्स्ट जो है पुराण का, अष्टादश महापुराण या वाल्मीकि रामायण, यह इसका जीवन, लाइफ ऑफ दिस टेक्स्ट comes only through प्रवचन। भागवत सप्ताह, रामायण सप्ताह, जो कुछ भी चलता है उसमें से इस टेक्स्ट को लाइफ मिलता है, जीवन मिलता है। तब तक, जब तक इसका प्रवचन नहीं चलता है, यह टेक्स्ट डेड रूप में रह जाता है, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट के रूप में रह जाता है। प्रवचन से ही, उसका हरिकथा से ही, यात्रा से ही परफॉर्मिंग फॉर्म से ही उसका टेक्स्ट का जीवन मिलता है। समझ गए आप? यह कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, उस टेक्स्ट का कॉन्टेक्स्ट है। हम जब श्रव्य काव्य बोलते हैं ना, श्रव्य काव्य बोले तो श्रव्य काव्य में जो सौंदर्य है वह सौंदर्य टेक्स्ट से नहीं मिलता, सिर्फ शब्दों से नहीं मिलता, कॉन्टेक्स्ट से ही मिलता है, श्रवण से ही मिलता है। जब हम बोलते हैं ना इसमें माधुर्य है, इसमें ये रीति है, वो वृत्ति है, ये गुण है, ये सब गुण श्रवण से ही आते हैं, इसीलिए उनको श्रव्य काव्य बोलते हैं। श्रव्य काव्य का जीवन श्रवण से होता है, मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट से नहीं। समझ गए? मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट उसका डेड फॉर्म है, मृत रूप है। उसका जीवन उसको गाने से, प्रवचन करने से, पाठ करने से ही आता है, इसलिए हम उसको कॉन्टेक्स्ट बोलते हैं। जब कवि लोग लिखते थे उनको राजाओं के सभाओं में भी उसका पठन करने के लिए एक प्रोफेशनल था, उस प्रोफेशनल का डिमांड भी होता था। ये कवि लोग बोलते थे मुझे अच्छा रीडर को दो, पाठ करने वाला आदमी को दो, इसलिए कि वो अच्छी तरह से पाठ करना है। मेरा जो उद्देश्य है इस कविता लिखने में, उस उद्देश्य को ठीक से बाहर लाने के लिए अच्छा पाठक का जरूरत है मुझे। तो राजा दे देता था, इस आदमी को ले लो, ये अच्छी तरह से पाठ कर देगा। आकर के सभा में वह आदमी उसको पठन करके बताता था, अच्छी तरह से गाता था उसको, तब उसको कॉन्टेक्स्ट मिलता था, उसको जीवन मिलता था। ऐसा हम उसको देखना है, किस तरह गाने से इसका सौंदर्य निकलता है। हम जब गाते नहीं तो देखते रहते तो कुछ भी समझ में नहीं आता है। मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट पढ़ने से, अपने आप में पढ़ लेने से, मौन पठन करने से, देखने से श्रव्य काव्य का श्राव्य सौंदर्य नहीं बाहर आ सकता है। इसके लिए हमको पठन परफॉर्मेंस, रीडिंग आउट परफॉर्मेंस चाहिए। इसलिए और एक शब्द लिख लीजिए, परफॉर्मेंस स्टडीज। दे यूज द वर्ड परफॉर्मेंस स्टडीज। टेक्स्ट को परफॉर्मेंस में लाते हैं, टेक्स्ट को जो परफॉर्मेंस में हम लाते हैं तभी उसका जीवन मिलता है, उसमें जो कुछ भी सौंदर्य है वह सौंदर्य बाहर निकल सकता है। अर्थ भी कॉन्टेक्स्ट से ही आता है, टेक्स्ट का सच्ची मीनिंग कॉन्टेक्स्ट से ही आता है। मैं आपको एक एग्जाम्पल देता हूं, ये टेक्स्ट के ऊपर निर्भर होने से क्या हो सकता है। अपने मातृभाषा में, तेलुगु में एक प्रॉवर्ब है, उस प्रॉवर्ब का मीनिंग है, आज फेस्टिवल है, आज त्योहार है, त्योहार के दिन भी पुराना ही मर्द मुझे, पुराना ही हस्बैंड। यह उस प्रॉवर्ब का मीनिंग है। एक रचयिता क्या किया, एक ऑथर क्या किया, इसको लेकर बहुत बड़ा प्रबंध लिख दिया। वो बोला कि पुराने जमाने में लोग, औरत लोग फेस्टिवल के दिन, त्योहार के दिन नए हस्बैंड को चुन कर लेते थे बोलकर। ये प्रॉवर्ब उस प्रथा से निकलकर इधर आया है, ऐसा एक प्रबंध लिख दिया वो। और सब लोग उसको पढ़कर, अरे क्या एंथ्रोपोलॉजी है, अरे कितना बड़ा स्कॉलर है, अरे कैसे रिसर्च कर दिया। ये प्रॉवर्ब को पढ़कर एक कहानी बना दिया, वो कहानी एंथ्रोपोलॉजी हो जाता है, शास्त्र हो जाता है, साइंस हो जाता है, सब कुछ हो रहा था। तब मैं जाकर के बोला एक सभा में कि यह एक जोक है। इस जोक में क्या है, हर त्योहार के दिन क्या होता है, हम नए कपड़े लेते हैं, है ना, कपड़े पहनते हैं, सब कुछ नया 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 होते रहता है। एक मूर्ख औरत सब कुछ मुझे नया मिला है और नया हस्बैंड भी मिलना चाहिए ऐसा बोल दिया है, ये मूर्ख है। उसको मूर्ख बताने के लिए ये प्रोवर्ब आ गया है, मुहावरा आ गया है। यह मुहावरा जोक है। इस जोक का लेकर क्या कर दिया वो, एंथ्रोपोलॉजी स्टोरी का बना दिया और लोग समझने लगे कि हाँ 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 यह बहुत अच्छा एंथ्रोपोलॉजी है। So what has happened is, by depending on purely on a text without actually knowing the context, when it is used, where is it used, who uses it, and what is the purpose. The purpose of this proverb is hasya, humor. So the proverb has aesthetics in it. There are aesthetics for proverb use also. Proverbs are also used for aesthetics, and hasya is the aesthetics. Humor is the aesthetics in this, and the humor is coming because the wife in this story, in the proverb, is deliberately being shown to be a foolish woman who cannot expect a new husband. She can only expect all new things, new clothes and new everything, but it is not possible to have a new husband. She did not know, and she is unnecessarily, foolishly asking for this. That is the meaning, that is the joke, that is the wit in it. So this so-called anthropology man that was creating anthropology, he is a stupid, basically, more than this woman in the story, because he considered that proverb to be a documentation, a record of some old thing that happened, and on the basis of this he created the story. If he wants to do some such research, what should he do? He should first of all study whether such a custom really existed in some community or not. For that existence, is there any documentation or not? If that documentation is there, is this proverb available in the community where this custom existed or not? If, for example, this proverb exists in Telugu, it does not exist in Kannada or Tamil or any other language, it means that this custom should have existed only in the Telugu people, and for this to be true, for the anthropological interpretation that this man is giving to be true, he should have evidence that Telugu people had this custom. For that he should have documentation somewhere, but he could not prove. His proof is this proverb only. This proverb only is the proof for him, but that cannot be a proof. It should be cross-checked with the actual existence of such a tradition, then he can connect these two. Okay? So this is the problem with the pure textual understanding of things without understanding the context. This word text has been extended, not only, it did not remain limited to verbal text, that is शब्द के रूप में, वाक्यों के रूप में जो होते हैं टेक्स्ट, उसी को लिमिटेड नहीं रहा, एक पेंटिंग को भी टेक्स्ट कहने लगे हैं। आजकल टेक्स्ट बोले तो एक पेंटिंग भी एक टेक्स्ट है, एक स्कल्पचर भी एक टेक्स्ट है। ये हर एक चीज, हर एक कल्चरल आइटम, nowadays in extended textual studies, they consider all these things to be texts only. So please start understanding things that way. And even the sculpture has a context, painting has a context. So we have to understand paintings also in terms of context only, text to context only. Sculptures also are to be understood in terms of context only. So for example, we were discussing phallic interpretation of Shiva Linga. So if you look at just the Shiva Linga, that is the text. So if you interpret that to be phallus, it is purely a textual interpretation. You wanted to interpret that text of the sculpture image of Shivalinga the way you understand it. But when you go to the temple and watch the people, how they worship it, with what idea they worship it, what is the attitude they have towards it, that is a contextual understanding of this text. Okay. So that is the right interpretation of Shivalinga. Everyone looks at that to be an image of Shiva only, all the time. So what is the contextual meaning of the text called Shivalinga? It is the image of Shiva only, that's all. That is the contextual meaning. What is the beauty of these Indologists is, they know all these, text, context, orality, literacy. A contextual meaning is only to be given, textual meaning is not correct, we should not give meanings to the text only based on the text only. All these they have studied and they have been trained and they know, but when Shivalinga is to be interpreted, they do only purely textual interpretation. I will give you a few more examples of what is the problem with not going to the context, only going to the text. Manusmriti. After this class, you go to the Wikipedia page of Manusmriti, look at that, come down, scroll down, you will see that that page is telling you that Manusmriti was never used as a Dharma Shastra text in India in the past. It was not executed. It was not administered as a Dharma Shastra text. It's a fact. Fact is that the so-called text of Manusmriti that we are all talking about, it was dug out only during the British period. When the British wanted some kind of a Smriti text to be used to control Indian legal affairs, they wanted to bring out some book and they ordered some scholars to bring some book. And they found this book. This book was not there. That book was not artificially created. That book was not concocted. It was there, but it was not used. People were not using Manusmriti as a book of legal affairs. Just think of, in India, legal disputes are settled in villages only by the village heads. There is a village panchayat. That village panchayat only settles the legal disputes. For example, a woman wants a divorce in a village, they don't go to the court. And in traditional Brahmin society, divorce is not there. Divorce does not exist. But in non-Brahmin communities of all the villages of India, divorce is an easy affair. If they go and complain that I want to have a divorce, easily it is sanctioned by the village heads. They just go and say, I don't like this man, हाँ इसको नहीं चाहते हो ना, जाओ, इसको भी पूछते हैं, तुम भी नहीं चाहती हो क्या, ऐसे औरत से कैसे जी सकता हूँ, तो छोड़ दो, छोड़ दो, हो गया डाइवोर्स, वहाँ का हाँ हो जाता है. ये सब सेटलमेंट्स हो जाते हैं विलेज में, विलेज हेड्स से, विलेज पंचायत से. और कैस्ट का भी और एक पंचायत होता है, जात पंचायत अलग से होता है. उस जात के लोग उस जात के पंचायत के पास जाते हैं, सेटलमेंट हो जाता है. कोर्ट तक जाने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं रहता है. ये कप पंचायत का बहुत कुछ चल रहा है ना, वह वैसे ही है. कप लोगों का कप कैस्ट है, कप एक जात है, कप जात का लोगों का कप पंचायत था. उसमें एक डिसीजन हुआ था और वह डिसीजन अच्छा है या बुरा है, कोर्ट क्या बोला है, एक अलग स्टोरी है. मगर यह एक एविडेंस है देखने के लिए कि कप जैसे कैस्ट में कैस्ट पंचायत होता है, वे डिसीजंस देते हैं, लोग उसको फॉलो करते हैं, है ना. आज भी मनुस्मृति उनको पता है क्या? कप पंचायत जो जजमेंट्स दे रही है, वो पंचायत के लोग मनुस्मृति कभी पढ़े हैं क्या? हाँ, नहीं पढ़े हैं. फिर भी मनुस्मृति में जो भी है वही उनके दिमाग में बैठ गया है, इसलिए ऐसे कर रहे थे. ऐसा सोचे तो भी जाकर देखो, कप पंचायत जो जजमेंट दिया है वह मनुस्मृति में है क्या? नहीं. इसी कप पंचायत में कितने भी जजमेंट्स आए हैं, कितने भी डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशंस आए हैं, उन रेजोल्यूशंस में जो जो डिसीशंस हुए हैं, ये सब इसमें है क्या? मनुस्मृति में नहीं है। डाइवोर्स दे दो, ऐसा नहीं होता है। मनुस्मृति में डाइवोर्स का शब्द ही नहीं है ना? तो कौन लोग संख्या में ज्यादा होते हैं, संख्या में अधिक कौन होते हैं? मनुस्मृति को जानने वाले या खप पंचायत जैसे कास्ट पंचायत में जाने वाले, कौन ज्यादा होते हैं? संख्या में कौन अधिक होते हैं भारत में? हाँ, खप पंचायत जैसे जात पंचायत में जाने वाले लोग ही संख्या में अधिकांश होते हैं। इसका मतलब अधिकांश लोग स्मृति को नहीं मानते हैं, स्मृति के बारे में वे जानते भी नहीं हैं, और उनके डिस्प्यूट सेटलमेंट के आइडियोलॉजी जो है वह स्मृति से अलग है। यह वास्तविकता है, यह तथ्य है। इस तथ्य को जो टेक्स्ट को देखकर बात करता है वह समझता नहीं है। अब बाहर के इंडोलॉजिस्ट जब इधर आए तो उनको टेक्स्ट ही मिला, टेक्स्ट को देखकर, टेक्स्ट में जो कुछ भी है, मनुस्मृति बोलता है इस जात के लोगों को मार दो, तो बोल देते हैं इस जात के लोगों को मारते गए हैं। मनुस्मृति में बोला जाता है इस जात के लोग अगर चोरी करते हैं तो उसको लकड़ी लेकर दंड दो, तो बोल देते हैं कि इस जात के लोगों को सदियों से लकड़ी लेकर मारते गए हैं। तुमको कैसे मालूम? तुम देखे हो क्या? तुमको टाइम मशीन मिल गया, उसमें बैठकर पीछे जाकर देखा? तो नहीं, ये इस बुक में लिखा है ना, बुक में लिखा है तो चला है, वैसे ही चला है। ऐसा कोई बोलता है तो उसको हम टेक्सचुअलिज्म बोलते हैं। उसमें एक पागलपन है, उस पागलपन का नाम टेक्सचुअलिज्म है। टेक्सचुअलिज्म एक पागलपन है। सिर्फ टेक्स्ट को देखते हैं, टेक्स्ट में जो कुछ भी है वह चला बोल देते हैं, वही चला है, इसी तरह चला है, टेक्स्ट में जो कुछ भी है वह चला है, ऐसा बोल देते तो उसको हम टेक्सचुअलिज्म बोलते हैं। ये पाश्चात्य इंडोलॉजिस्ट जो भी हैं, ये सब जिस पागलपन में थे, बोलो, टेक्सचुअलिज्म में थे, टेक्सचुअलिस्ट हैं वे। अभी भी ये टेक्सचुअलिज्म गलत है, वे भी बोलते हैं टेक्सचुअलिज्म गलत है, टेक्स्ट को नहीं मानना, कॉन्टेक्स्ट के पास जाना, कॉन्टेक्स्ट को ले लेना, सब बातें तो बोलते हैं, सैद्धांतिक रूप में बोलते हैं, इसलिए कि उनका ट्रेनिंग में ऐसा बोला गया, उनको सीख लेते हैं। मगर जब भारत के तरफ उंगली उठाना पड़ता है तो सब भूल जाते हैं, सब भूल जाकर बोल देते हैं कि इस बुक में है इसलिए वो सच है। तो हम बोलते हैं टेक्सचुअलिज्म है। हाँ, टेक्सचुअलिज्म हो सकता है, फिर भी सच है। क्यों? मुझे सच लगता है। क्यों सच लगता है? पसंद है, मुझे मजा आता है उसे बोलने में। शास्त्रीय नहीं है ना, तो शास्त्रीय नहीं है फिर भी अच्छा है, इसलिए कि भारत के तरफ उंगली उठाने में मुझे आनंद मिलता है। Right? So the mistakes that are being committed by Indologists, some of them are rooted in a problem called textualism. They are based only on the text but not the actual context. Whether it is actually being used in the society or not, they are not caring. They are basing only on a book. And even in India today, when newspapers publish, sometimes they say in a village this incident happened, some other times they say in the book it is there. Okay, in the book it is there, did it happen? No, book it is there, burn the book. They burn the book. They burn मनुस्मृति. क्या करना है? मनुस्मृति बर्न करने से अच्छा ही है, एक कापी तो बर्न ही होता है, बहुत से कापीज मिलते हैं लाइब्रेरी में। सबको जला तो नहीं सकते ना। अगर हम कैलेंडर को फाड़ देंगे तो तारे तो नीचे नहीं गिरते ना। कैलेंडर में तारे है ना, नक्षत्र है। कैलेंडर को फाड़ दो, नक्षत्र गिरते क्या? कैलेंडर को तो फाड़ सकते हो, मनुस्मृति को बर्न कर सकते हो, दहन कर सकते हो, क्या होगा? मनुस्मृति मनुस्मृति ही रहेगा। मनुस्मृति का आचरण में मनुस्मृति आया था क्या, मनुस्मृति का आचरण हुआ था क्या, इसका फील्ड वर्क करके देखना चाहिए। मैं, आप लोगों को पता है, मैं एंथ्रोपोलॉजिस्ट हूँ, फील्ड वर्क करता हूँ। मैं जो कुछ भी बोलता हूँ फील्ड वर्क करके ही बोलता हूँ। इसलिए मैं किसी को भी फील्ड वर्क करो बोलता हूँ, फील्ड वर्क करो। अगर कोई भी फील्ड वर्क नहीं करता है तो वैसे स्कॉलर को आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर बोलते हैं। आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर। आर्म चेयर्ड का मतलब है एक इजी चेयर रहता है ना, इजी चेयर घर में, इजी चेयर को आर्म चेयर बोलते हैं। कुर्सी में आसान से सुविधा से बैठ जाता है, वहीं बैठकर सब बोलते रहता है। वैसे आदमी को सुस्त आदमी बोलने के लिए, यह सुस्त आदमी है बोलने के लिए, उसको हम बोलते हैं आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर। जो कुछ भी टेक्सचुअलिस्ट है ना, ये सब कौन से स्कॉलर्स हैं? आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर्स। बहुत से गालियां मिल रहे हैं ना, अभी गालियों का डिक्शनरी मिल रहा है। अभी किसी इंडोलॉजिस्ट को बोलना है तो ये तुम आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर हो बोल सकते हैं। हाँ, टेक्सचुअलिस्ट हो, तुम तो टेक्सचुअलिस्ट हो, हाँ, सिर्फ टेक्सचुअलिस्ट हो, आर्म चेयर्ड स्कॉलर हो, सुस्त आदमी हो, काम नहीं करते हो, क्षेत्र में नहीं जाते हो, क्षेत्र में जाकर के क्षेत्र कार्य करो, सुस्त नहीं बैठो, सुस्त मत बैठो, जाकर के काम करके बात करो, क्षेत्र कार्य करो, समाज में जाओ, समाज को देखो, देख करके बात करो। यह हमारा संदेश होगा उन लोगों के लिए, हमारे लिए भी। हम भी क्षेत्र कार्य करना है, जो कुछ भी टेक्स्ट को समझना है तो हम भी जाकर उसका क्षेत्र कार्य करना है, तभी समझ में आता है। और शब्द मिल गए हैं ना, हर रोज हर क्लास में, हर लेक्चर में, हर टॉक में शब्द ही शब्द, परिभाषाएं, इतने टेक्निकल टर्म्स है ना। आज कौन से मिल गए हैं? ओरैलिटी, लिटरेसी, ओरल सोसाइटीज, लिटरेट सोसाइटीज। ओरल सोसाइटीज, लिटरेट सोसाइटीज बनने में क्या हो गया? एक टेक्स्ट ओरल फॉर्म से रिटन फॉर्म में आने में क्या हो गया? प्रिंट में आने में क्या हो गया? टेक्नोलॉजाइजिंग द वर्ड, ऑल दैट, and text to context and textualism, all these words we have learned, so many words, so that we can use in future when we imagine things, we imagine in terms of these words, we can understand things much better without actually sticking to this book is saying this, that is why it is correct, we will not say in future. So this text to context is, I have shown you the example of proverb also. Even proverb is a text. Even an image of Shivalinga is a text. Even a photograph is a text. So the relation between text and context we start understanding. We don't conclude just by looking at a photograph. We don't conclude that this is what it is. Where it is kept? Where is this photograph being kept? What is the use of this photograph in this particular room? All that makes sense, not just the photograph. Okay, that is the text context relationship. Okay, so probably your brain has burned so much that it is making you more hungry than usual. Let us walk towards lunch.
शांति शांति शांति। हरि ओम तत्सत्। श्री राम कृष्णार्पणमस्तु।
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः।